fellow bookworms, to Tibera's Den. My name is Whitney, and we are reading Nora Roberts' Legacy. We just finished chapters 9, 10, 11, and 12, so if you're not all caught up, no worries. You can go ahead and jump off this video, get caught up, and then come back to participate in the discussion questions. Or if you haven't even started reading this book, it is never too late. Go ahead and pick it up and read it, and then you can participate in the different discussion questions for the different chapters as you read each set of chapters. But it is really good, so I do highly recommend it. But as always, I just want to point out there are going to be a certain level of spoilers as we discuss these chapters and these characters. So like I said, if you're not caught up, go ahead and jump off this video and come back once you are. But let's go ahead and get right into it. Of course, we're starting with chapter 9. My first question is, Adrian is back home now, bringing Tisha along with her and reconnecting to Maya. We talked previously about the value Adrian places on relationships. What value do you think Tisha and Maya put on their relationship with Adrian? And any relationship definitely takes both parties. Like, one person cannot hold the relationship. And I think with Maya, there's a certain value there because they've been able to maintain this relationship throughout their entire childhood into adulthood. And, Adrian doesn't really have a lot of friends. They kind of jump around a lot. She's not always in school. Where Maya has the small community, and so she definitely probably has a circle of friends, but she's still able to maintain that relationship with Adrian, which I think speaks to how much she values that relationship. And then also, now that Adrian's back home, like, there's no hesitation in kind of including Adrian in the folds of her everyday life, which again I think shows that this relationship is important to her, and it just kind of comes naturally that she would be a part of everyday life now that she's back and living there, even though Maya has her family and her son now. And then with Tisha, obviously they've been really close knit, since high school, going to college together, being roommates, working together. And I know Tisha was already speaking with her husband about relocating to a more family-friendly area like the suburbs, but I think the fact that she's willing to move so far away from New York and to such a small town definitely shows how much she does value Adrian. I don't think because obviously they can maintain their friendship and their working relationship no problem, even if Tisha had stayed put. But she does value that, and it does show just how close they really are, the fact that she is willing to relocate. So that's kind of my thoughts on it. Life continues to move forward, and Dom is able to go back to the restaurant. How instrumental do you think Adrian was in his ability to go back to the restaurant and find joy in life again? And I think she was extremely instrumental. I mean, I know it's a small town and people would have been checking in on him and everything, but it's just not the same. One, she's able to kind of provide him the time to grieve and not have to worry about the restaurant or anything like that. I mean, Jan would have been able to do that, but Jan, lost Loralee in the same instance he lost Sophia. And so she, had to deal with that. And so it was, kind of both of them dealing with these major events. And so that definitely played a part. And so I think Adrian being there and being able to kind of help with the restaurant and everything and just allow him to grieve definitely was very helpful. But at the same time, she's also there making sure he's taking care of himself. So making sure he eats, because he doesn't have much of an appetite. Making sure he gets outside for fresh air and things like that, but not being so overbearing, because she does recognize his grief and respect that grief because she's grieving too. But she's also being positive and, just trying to be that light in the household. And then she also has her friends coming over with their children, which I think Maya would have anyway because there's definitely that connection there. But I don't think she would have as often. But now, you have these children running around in the yard again. And then they go and adopt a dog. So that's another little spark of joy that he can kind of focus on and hold on to. And so he wouldn't have those little things if Adrian hadn't moved back home. And so I think she was really, really important to kind of helping him process and go through the grieving process. And the next question is, why does Adrian have a flashback of the night her biological father tries to kill her, even though it has been years? And I know I probably didn't phrase that question quite right, but I think it's really important to recognize that it doesn't matter when trauma happens, what age it happens at, how many years it's been, how well you're doing now. Like, trauma is trauma and it can resurface at any point in time. And we definitely see that with Adrian. And, you know, she was at the mirror working on a workout routine and it made her think of when her mother, and she's probably done this many, many times, but in that instant, she was just thinking about how her mother used to do the same thing and how she would sit there and watch her. And that's what she was doing the night her father tried to kill her. And so it triggered that flashback. And so, like I said, I think it's really important because I think sometimes people like to compare trauma or judge, like, that's judge trauma. Like, it doesn't matter, like I said, when it happened, how many years ago it happened, how well you're doing now. Trauma can resurface at any point, and I think it's really important to recognize that. So the next and last question for this chapter is, after the flashback, Adrian sees a little bit of her 7-year-old self in Sadie. She makes the choice to pause her workout and spend time with the dog. How important do you think it is to have a balance between working and spending time with loved ones, even a dog? And I think it's extremely important, not only for your relationship with others, but for your own well being as well. Um, we're humans, we thrive on that connection. Even the most introverted human like me still thrives on those connections. And so I think it's really, really important that we take time for the relationships we have in our lives, whether it's another person or a dog. And I think, especially with children and animals, they can't understand why, as an adult, can understand, okay, you're busy, you have this to focus on. But children and animals don't understand that. All they know is that they need your attention and they're not getting it. And so I think it's extra important that we take the time out for them. And Adrian, was once that little girl longing for her mother's attention. And so she recognizes that. And so she takes the moment out as she sees the dog watching her. She takes the time and she goes and plays ball with the dog because her workout's going to be there waiting. The routine's going to be there waiting. And so I think it's extremely important, and I'm glad that Adrian does recognize that. So we're going to go ahead and move on to chapter 10. And my first question is, Raylan dreams of Lauralee, which helps him with his grief. Do you believe it was Lauralee or just his subconscious? And honestly, I personally like to believe that our loved ones come and visit us even after they've passed on. Um, but regardless, whether you believe in it or it's just a subconscious, I think there's definitely like a healing property. I've never lost anyone in person that's been super close to me, but I have had to say goodbye to many pets, and I've had them visit me in dreams before, and it's just, there's such a peace, seeing them again and being able to have that moment with them, even in just a dream. And so I think, regardless whether, it was really her coming back to kind of talk to him a little bit or it was just his subconscious, there's still a certain level of healing there. And so I think it doesn't matter what people believe, whether they believe it or not, there's still that healing property there. And I think it's really important to have that. So the next question is what are your thoughts on Raylan turning Lauralee into a graphic novel character? And I think it's a really beautiful way, to take his art and something he's passionate about and honor her with it. I think it's a really beautiful tribute to her, and then also it's honoring the sacrifice with the storyline, the sacrifice that she made so that boy can live. And so I don't have a lot of words for that one, like this question. All I know is I think it's a beautiful way for him to kind of honor her and honor her memory. So the next question is, Raylan decides to move back to his hometown with his kids. How hard do you think this choice was for him? And I think it had to be extremely difficult. Like, he recognizes that he's struggling, like he's sinking, and he recognizes that both him and his kids need family. Um, so I think he definitely made the right choice moving home, but at the same time he's saying goodbye to this home that he built with Laura Lee, and it's kind of like finally, even though he already lost her, and so the dreams they had are already gone, it's kind of closing that. And so I think, to say goodbye not only to her, but this house they built together and all the memories they have there definitely had to be extremely difficult for him. But at the same time, he does recognize that this is what's necessary, and he does make that right choice, even though it's really hard. And then the last question for this chapter is Dom talks about his will with Adrian. What do you think she'll do with Rizzo's if/when he passes? And I think she will, or at least I think she should, kind of start a partnership with Jan. Jan's already been managing this restaurant for so many years, and she's definitely kind of already part of the family. And Adrian has her fitness brand and that, and I don't see her giving that up. So it would make sense for her to kind of go into a partnership with Jan. I don't think she would give up the restaurant either. So it's kind of a way for her to do both. Still, work on her brand and her fitness videos and everything like that, while honoring the legacy that her grandfather leaves for her. And I definitely see her, having a hand in the restaurant, even if she is focusing on the fitness videos, um, but just kind of leaving everything to Jan. And she might do that just having Jan in a management position, but I think Jan's kind of earned her stake in the restaurant at this point. So I would hope that that's what she would do, but you know, who knows? Who knows what she's gonna do? And that is the end of part one, which was ambitions, and now we're going on to part two, which is changes. And so it starts with chapter 11, and the first question is, what do you think of the way that kids, Bradley in particular, are handling the move? And as Bradley kind of mentions, Mariah's still a baby. She's still very young. And so she's kind of rolling with it. Like, she doesn't fully understand. Where he's old enough, he does understand what's happening. But I think he's definitely approaching it with like a level of maturity, which I think is pretty impressive. He's already said goodbye to his friends, his teammates, and all these things. But we also see the child in him when he asks if his mother's going to still be with them, um, which I think is really sweet as well. So even though he's really being mature and handling this well, he's still a child and he still kind of has that insecurity and that doubt, which I think the author captured that nicely. So, and then the next question is, based on the poet's point of view in this chapter, do you think they are struggling with control? And I think they've always kind of struggled with control somewhat, because back when we first saw the first point of view from the poet, he kills that woman with a gun, and he wants to wake her up, and so he can see the fear in his eyes. But no, we can't do that. And so he's smart, or they again, we don't know if it's a male or female. I'm just leaning more towards the male. I think just how much hatred he has towards these women. So if I call him he, just go with it, even though we don't actually know. And so I think, he's always kind of struggled with control. And then he shoots that woman a fourth time just for the delight of it. But in this point of view, in this chapter, he really has to kind of talk himself. Like, it's so fun, it's so fun. And then, no, you need to have control, you need to have control. But he really has to talk himself into it. And, it took him a while. Like, he keeps, it's kind of gruesome, but he keeps beating this woman, long past the point where she stopped breathing. And so I think, we're seeing that control start to slip a little bit. Like, he's, really having to rein himself in, even though he's always kind of had to do that. And so the next question is, do you think Raylan will have trouble readjusting to small town life after having lived in New York? And I don't, because he grew up in this small town and those values are kind of instilled in him. And even though he's only been there, what, a day or so, um, we already see that when he has his interaction with Mrs. Pinsky, I think is her name. And so we kind of see that those small town values and everything are still kind of ingrained in him, and he took those values to New York. He kind of was able to bridge the gap between family values, small town life, and New York. And so I don't think he's gonna have trouble readjusting to small town life. I think it's just adjusting to not having Laura Leah and those dreams anymore. So, and then the last question for this chapter is, what do you think of the differences between Raylan's vision of Laura Lee's graphic novel character and the one he pictures for Adrian? And I definitely think it shows the differences between the two women, themselves. With Laura Lee, there's a softness and a sweetness to her that he captures in her graphic novel character, but there's also a strength, which is why she's the heroine of these novels as well. And then with Adrian, there's definitely a certain fierceness, and she does have demons. Not only did her father try to kill her when she was a child, she has this poet that is a constant source of stress and you know trauma that she has to deal with. And even though he doesn't know about the poet, he does know about her father. And so, she does have those demons, and there is a certain like fierceness to her, um, that I think he is able to see and recognize. And then also, I think the way he describes how the story's going to go, um, he recognizes the goodness in Adrian because he's going to become an ally for Laura Lee's heroine. And so I think that's really important as well. He does recognize that. And I think that also honors the relationship that the two women had formed in real life as well. So I think it's kind of cool, like seeing the differences, not only in their characters, but how it reflects on the real women that he's basing these characters off of. So let's go ahead and move on to chapter 12. And the first question is, what do you think of the way life circles around with Raylan's kids sitting at the same counter he did as a child? And I've actually had it hit me before a couple times. Once was I was hanging out with my cousin, and my cousin had her first little boy at the time, and it just kind of hit me that our parents did this. They had young children and hung out together. And then another one that hit me is my niece is now a mom, and I remember when she was a baby, and so it's just, I don't think, I think everybody knows there's kind of that circle of life, but I don't think we always recognize it. Sometimes we forget that our parents were on the exact same level we were at one time, and we are going to be at the exact same level they are right now. And so I think it's really cool how life just kind of circles around, and those little moments that captures that sometimes. And then the next question is, what do you think it is about the reality of a new home that strikes Raylan? And I think it's kind of another type of cycle. And as hard as leaving New York and leaving the home he built with Laura Lee was, I don't think it really hit home for him until he was looking at a new home and it realized that this really has happened. Like, and Bradley sees, that thought process in his father, and thinks his father doesn't like the house. But I think it's just he's having a hard time because of everything he's having to say goodbye to, and it's finally hitting home as he's starting the process to build a new home with his kids without Laura Lee. It's just finally really hitting him that this is real. And then he's also comparing, the home to the home he had with Laura Lee and everything they loved about that home. So I definitely think, like I said, it just hit him, and it is kind of another cycle. That portion of life has closed now, and he's moving on to a new cycle with his children without Laura Lee. And then on the outside, Adrian doesn't seem like the graphic novel type. What do you think it is about them that draws her? And I personally think it's the strength of the characters, on two different levels. I think she can respect them from a fitness standpoint, you know, because we know like that's her life. Like she's really into fitness and everything. And so you have like these characters that are extremely fit and use the strength in their bodies for all these different things. And then at the same time there's also kind of a mental aspect as well. Like these characters aren't afraid to kind of do what's right, and they have like a mental fitness as well to take on anything that comes, which I think is something that she can respect as well. And the last question is, Raylan ignores the lust he feels for Adrian. How difficult do you think it is going to be for him to start a relationship with her? And I think it's going to be really hard for him on two separate levels. I mean, you have one that she's his sister's friend from childhood, so he has to kind of struggle to get over that mental block. But then at the same time, even if she had no connection with his sister at all, she's also he also has to kind of get past the guilt that he's gonna feel from moving on from Morley, even though you know she passed away and everything, there's still that guilt, like, and so I think he has to kind of move on from that, and kind of process those thoughts. And then also there's the children as well that he has to consider, and how they're gonna handle having a new woman come into life. So there's kind of three separate things that he's gonna have to kind of process and get through with starting a relationship with her, which I think is gonna be very hard for him. Um, and so yeah, it's gonna be definitely interesting to see how he processes that and such going forward. But that's it for these chapters. I hope you enjoyed them as much as I did. We're going to be reading chapters 13, 14, 15, and 16 this week. And of course, we will discuss them next Monday. Let me know your thoughts on these chapters down in the comments. I hope you'll answer some of the questions we covered. And I'm going to go ahead and leave you here. Happy reading, everyone. Bye.